I know it's been a while, but with summer break finally over and my Wi-Fi fixed, I can finally get back to making videos. And what's the best way to start a new series? To do exactly what I did before. So as I said before, my Wi-Fi router got nuked because the big old Wi-Fi box down the road decided it didn't want to live anymore. It then took a good couple weeks for the technicians to fix it, but that gave me some time to explore my old games, and I realised there were quite a few good ideas that had been neglected because back then, well, I was just shit at making games. So in today's video we'll be looking back at some old games that have never been viewed by anyone but me and giving them a good old remaster. So the first game we're going to remaster is an old classic that you real OGs may remember. Bit Sandbox is a pretty simple game idea. Basically you click play, it gives you a random map, and then the description basically describes the rest. You can set fire to grass and forest tiles by clicking them. Fire spreads, obvi, but water can't set on fire. Eventually fire will turn into ash, ash into dirt, and then dirt into grass. Forest spreads slowly and sometimes grass tiles randomly begin new forests, but that's very rare. Have fun, arsonists. The game basically just ran off clone detection, clicking, and a really janky method of generating a map, where I basically just layered a bunch of doodles for the different tile types on top of each other, and then the separate tiles would change their tile type based on if they were colliding with that doodle, which is good problem solving but doesn't really create a variety of interesting maps. And on top of that, the maps are very small, and I didn't even know about run without screen refresh back then, which is really the best thing to happen to Scratch since the platform's creation. When I made it, it was probably my best creation yet, but if I'm brutally honest, the game is just boring. Most of the time the tiles don't even register that they've been clicked, and there's no real gameplay except to watch a very blocky fire spread. So let's get started in sprucing this game up. So I'm going to start by making a whole bunch of tiles, and first we're going to do the grass, and then I'm going to make a blue one. Now just to get the generation working first, we're only going to use these two tiles, which is obviously the grass and the water tiles, and then we need to have a whole bunch of clones spawning in, all in a big square. So I'm going to use run without screen refresh and call it instant gen. And I've just very quickly whipped up this little script. So now if we press play, you can see we got a nice little cube generating in the top corner. Then I'm going to change how much it separates with each time so we don't have those annoying little grid lines. And then I'm going to experiment with these little numbers to get it covering the whole screen. So now if I press play, it generates the big green square. And these are just all the little clones that are spawning in. And the reason why I've left a little gap down here is that I want a nice little hotbar that we can use so we can select different tools, because I want the player to be able to do more things than just set fire to stuff. I mean, as fun as that is, it doesn't really make an interesting game. So now if we make them switch costume to a random one, you can see we now have this weird kind of pattern going on. And that's known as a purling noise for you fancy schmancies. But somehow we gotta find a way for this to make natural terrain, which I'm not actually sure how to do. So I'm gonna do a little bit of research and try and find some sort of method that's gonna work. So how terrain generation works in other games, like example Minecraft, they basically generate a bunch of random numbers. They then generate another smaller set of numbers that then influence the original set of numbers, so they basically merge them together to create natural-ish terrain. Now I'm trying to replicate that idea, so I've basically done the same as the first sprite, but instead we have these big blobs, and then there's a random chance that they'll either spawn or they won't. And as you can see, if I press play, we then have like a randomly occurring herd of blobs. But then we can use this with these sprites to generate where land will be and where land won't be. So now I just need to make these two interact, and then hopefully we'll have a somewhat natural looking terrain. So now if it's touching the big blobs, then it's going to change to the land sprite, but if not, then it's going to change into water. So now let's see what that looks like. Okay, so we're heading in the right direction, but it's not exactly what I wanted. So that was a bit of a failure. It was too blocky and kept on generating big willies everywhere, but I changed the shapes, I randomized the positions of the blobs so they don't spawn in a straight line, and I added a little if statement that turns any grass tiles touching water to turn into a water block, so we can have smooth edges on our land masses. So hopefully now we should have a more promising result. It's getting better? I mean, it's very much still not there. But I mean, we're getting closer to land masses, that's kind of okay. I think I have to make these spawn closer though. So I smushed the blobs closer together, and it's getting there. But I'd like more land than that. I don't really want these kind of island structures. So I'm thinking what we do is we take this if statement and then we just make it more likely that it's gonna spawn in a blob. So now if we press play, ooh, that's looking nice. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. We don't seem to be spawning in any on this side, so I'm gonna even it out a bit. And as you can see, it's working pretty bloody well. And we've even got a faster loading time than the original bit sandbox. So now I think it's time we add some more tiles. Alright, so I've added this sand tile. I've also updated the colours a bit to make it a bit less gloomy. And I've added this if statement, so if it's touching blue and green, then hopefully it should switch to sand. So let's see if that works. I mean, that's looking pretty bloody good. And now I've just quickly added a different type of grass. It's called fertile grass, which is basically what the forest tiles were in the last bit sandbox. But the fertile grass will more appear inland, whilst the grass will be more near the sea and by the coast and things like that. I think it works pretty well visually as well, just to give that kind of contrast that we wanted. Now there are also rocks in the original bit sandbox, so of course we have to add rocks. Now I think I'm going to use much the same method as developing the land, but instead I'll just make rocks appear kind of randomly inland. Okay, so after a little bit of fiddling, I found a way to get rocks in. Now there's not many rocks, and they're not ginormous. That's because I couldn't find a way to make them bigger without crashing the game, like, instantly. Because to be fair, we are playing with literally 3k clones. But basically I just made it so one of the fertile tiles will just randomly turn into a stone tile. And then the fertile tiles just check if they're touching the stone tiles, and if they are, they switch costume to stone. And I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but if I zoom in editing, you'll see that I've softly textured the tiles. But now we need to make the toolbar, and obviously our first tool will be fire. And for now we can just write fire on it instead of making an icon for it. And then I've made these extra ones here because obviously we're going to have different tools. So if we just use these as a template, and then we can make a bunch of clones. And then I've just created a tool variable which will change depending on the costume number. So if the fire button is pressed, you'll then switch to the fire tool, etc, etc. So let's just check that's all working well. Yeah, look, it's all appeared. And now when I click them, it changes them to the correct tool number. Now if we make a fire block, which I'm going to try and make a bit more realistic than the last one. Alright, so I've made a fire sprite, and then I've also made an ash and a dirt sprite. Because if you remember, fire turns into ash, which turns into dirt, which eventually then turns back into grass. And then the cycle just continues. So now we need to make it so that we can actually set fires, and then make it so that they can spread. And that is very easily done, as you can see here. If tool is equal to 1 and it's one of the grass sprites, then switch costume to fire. Easy peasy. So now we'll press play. Since tool's 0, nothing should happen. We'll click fire. And then... hey, it's working. Unfortunately, I ran out of time for this video, but I will be making a part 2 very soon. So if you've made it this far, then please like and subscribe if you want to see that. I'll also have a link in the description if you want to join the Discord. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next devlog.